Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Up today it is a monstrous American steam locomotive. Today's loco is another insane bargain from Train World, and when I found this I just could not resist getting it, and I'm not kidding, it is an absolute monster. Here it comes right now. So it is a Union Pacific 484 steam locomotive. I believe it's part of the FEF series, and as you can see it's in a really fetching grey with yellow trim, and I do love grey liveries. So the RRP, Bachmann's RRP for this is £206, something like that. Well, this ended up costing me literally about £70, brand new from Train World, crazy. The price was $99.99. Now, of course, I had to pay a little bit more than that to get it shipped over here to the UK, and then I had to pay a bit of customs. But I bought this at the same time as 2 or 3 other locos, so it ended up only costing about £100, even with all the extra charges on top. So it can't be bad, can it? Surely this cannot be bad value for money, even if it's got a horrible mechanism and a poor level of detail. Given the sheer size of the locomotive, I really can't see myself being disappointed by this. However, I have been surprised before, so let's get this out together and figure out what it's like and find out whether it's any good. Very, very exciting. Let's do it. Wow, I don't even know what to say about this. It's such a departure from the sort of stuff I usually look at. It is quite a thrill. I cannot wait to find out what this is like. Of course, I have reviewed sort of 2 similar locos to this before, at least in terms of size. That was the Daylight and the Berkshire. I'm a huge fan of those, it must be said, and they were produced by Bachmann as well. So yeah, there's no reason to expect that I won't enjoy this one hugely, which is great news. So let me show you the end of the box. So this is item number 53502. It is HO scale, of course, 484 steam loco, DCC ready, so there is no decoder in this. That explains partly why it was so cheap. And it's Union Pacific 807. And like I say, from what I've been able to find out, I think this is an FEF series locomotive, which makes it, I think, the last class of steam locomotive, the last type of steam locomotive, if you will, to be produced for the Union Pacific Railroad, which makes this quite an important type of steam loco, I guess. Anyway, not much to see around the box, really, so I'm going to open it up for the first time. I don't know which side is best. Yeah, we'll go with this side. And let's figure out what this is all about. This has to be the largest locomotive I have ever bought for as little as £70. Or £100 if you consider the postage. Okay, the packaging is struggling to hold it. It's so big. I think we're okay. And, oh, I see why. Because the sleeve is still inside the box. Okay, fair enough, that explains it. Well, I guess I've already done that job then. Right, let's put these to one side. Let's take a quick look at the paperwork and the documentation. Okay, so it says smoke unit. The box will tell you if it's got one. Well, mine didn't, so I'm assuming not. Braking period, troubleshooting, lubrication and maintenance. That looks fairly standard. We got a diagram. Oh, okay, wow, full A3 sheet diagram. So we've got the loco on top there. You can see a bit about the mechanism. Gotta say, it doesn't look too bad. There's a very beefy motor. It's clearly got a flywheel. Yeah, I mean, hopefully the mechanism will be half decent. And then we've got the lower chassis, if you will, of the loco. Doesn't give very much away about this. I can see pickups, which I suppose is a good thing. That means this is not a split chassis loco like my GS4 Daylight, obviously, because this is a bit more modern, but that's fair enough. And then on the back there is the tender as well, and the tender chassis too. Obviously this is not a coal tender, it's an oil tender, as you can see, but more about that in a little while. So that's the first little pamphlet. I'm guessing, well, the rest of these are usually not much. I think that's warranty, and this is guarantee. You know, yeah, it's nothing important. Right, shall we do it then? Let's get to the loco. Let's stand this up. And oh god, yeah, the packaging is really not doing a great job of holding this. Look at that. Right, anyway, let's open this up and take a look. Wow, gosh, you know what? It looked like a standard sort of grey when it was in the box, but really there's a touch of green to that to make this almost a khaki colour. which I am actually really liking. That looks really quite cool. Okay, so the loco and tender do couple together electrically, but they are not coupled as they come straight out of the box. So let's take a close look at the tender first. And you know what? For the price, this is astonishing, isn't it? I mean, it's a huge, huge tender. I can tell straight away that the finish is beautiful. I can see we've got some quite primitive but existent pickups on the bottom there on some of those axles. So that's quite impressive. Hopefully this has got working lights as well. That would be super cool. Yeah, I mean, for what this cost, already this is lovely. So I'll put the tender to one side for just a second. Good weighty tender as well, I should say. And the star of the show, the loco herself. Wow, take a look at that. There's a bit of foam in the way of the rear bogie, but besides that, what a lovely loco this is. Is lovely the right word? I don't know. It's clearly built for a purpose, isn't it, and not for its looks, but I suppose you could say there is beauty in that. Yeah, that colour is really quite lovely. I did not realise it had a greenish tinge to it like that. Sort of. Yeah, hopefully that comes across on camera. So yeah, it looks fine. It looks like a really, really cool model. Doesn't look to be super detailed at this stage. And to be quite honest, for £70 to £100, that is not a surprise. I suppose the RRP of over £200 would cause you to expect a bit more detail, but as for what I paid, this looks pretty much spot on. Right, let me grab the tender and we'll hold the tender with the loco to give you an idea what that looks like. Won't couple them right now, but good lord. Yeah, it's a monster, isn't it? It's definitely a monster. Tell you what, in the running session, I will run a large British locomotive for comparison, and you'll see just how monstrous this is. And don't forget, this is HO scale. So in terms of scale, this is quite a bit smaller than any 00 loco, and yet I'm pretty sure I don't have any British steam locos that are this size. So yeah, it gives you an idea of the sheer mighty scale of a loco like this. Wow, and of course, I know whenever I talk about the scale of a loco, people always say, oh, the big boy is much bigger. Yes, of course it is, yes. And if I ever get a big boy, no doubt I'll be absolutely blown away by that as well. Anyway, a bit of history on this type of locomotive, and then I will show you this up close. So the FEF series was made up of 45 locomotives built between 1937 and 1944. And as I said earlier on, these would be the final locomotives to be built for the Union Pacific Railroad steam locos, that is. And they did have a relatively short working life, which ended in 1959. They were originally built to run on coal, actually, although as we can see from this model, the design was ultimately changed for oil firing, and like I say, the tender on this example does give that away. The FEFs were used for passenger trains, and they could run up to 100 miles per hour with a mighty tractive effort of 283 kilonewtons, which is nearly double that of a British Class A4, which over here was considered pretty darn powerful. After their retirement, only 4 examples were preserved, only one of which is still in operation now, which of course is a shame, and this example, number 807, was sadly scrapped along with the majority. So there she is, up close and personal for you then, Bachmann's Union Pacific FEF 484 locomotive. And overall, yeah, this is a really impressive beastie, isn't it, in terms of its proportions and just its massive size. And because it was so cheap, I will say that I am pleased with my purchase. I think it was a good value purchase. However, from an objective standpoint, this is a very, very basic model. Most of the detailing, most parts of the model are very, very basic, and some parts of it I would go as far as to say are quite crude. For instance, the loco to tender coupling is incredibly crude. You've got these 2 huge connectors which plug in just underneath the drawbar. They're not very subtle at all, and as you can see, you've got not 1 but 2 sets of wires which poke out on the side, and they are very visible looking at the locomotive side on. And because for some ungodly reason those connectors are underneath the drawbar, the tender doesn't sort of sit on the track properly, as you can see. If I push the tender down, you can see the front of the loco lifting up, which means there's something wrong in that drawbar assembly somewhere. I haven't fixed it yet because I wanted to film it to show you, but I'm thinking I'll either have to loosen the drawbar screw or bend the drawbar downwards so that it isn't lifting the tender up quite so much. It's a bit of a design nightmare, is that. The weight is quite good though, 654 grams is what this weighs in at, which is second only to my Helgent Garrett. So in terms of the raw locomotive that you get for your money, the value for money looks pretty good there as well. It should be said though that the bodywork of this loco is entirely plastic. There's nothing die-cast on display really. Obviously there will be a very, very heavy chassis block on the inside, and the wheels and the rods and everything, those are made of metal. But as far as the bodywork is concerned, yes, we're just talking plastic. So let me show you up close. Let's talk about why I think this is quite crude in areas. Let's talk about the decoration to start with, which is quite basic. Some aspects of the decoration are done quite nicely. You've got the running number on the side of the cab done in large lettering. I mean, it's neat and tidy. It's not a particularly intricate print, but it looks all right, doesn't it? And then you've got the sort of yellow stripe along the running plate, which is reasonably well applied. But then when you start looking at areas such as the firebox, which has been picked out in a silver, you can just see where some of the colours join. You've got a little bit of messy bleed going on there, and that is kind of the story with the model really. It's not decorated that carefully overall. So where the grey of the body meets the black of the running plate, you can see paint bleed. With the detailing up on top of the boiler, again, there is paint bleed between the different parts. The smoke box area, as you can see, there's a join there between the body and the running plate. Yeah, when you start looking up close, the illusion is shattered very slightly. The driving wheels, they are blackened, but they're not blackened too well. You can see there are areas of missing paint. And where you might expect to see builder's plates or other signage on more premium models, on this one you've just got blank empty spaces, which again betrays how basic this model is. And looking inside the cab, you can see there is no paintwork inside there, which I hear is quite normal for American locomotives, but it's still a detail that has been omitted. The loco does have one or two nice details, but overall it's quite low on separately fitted parts. Underneath the cab though, there's some reasonably nice moulded pipework which looks okay, and I would say the overall smoke box area is relatively well detailed because you've got quite a few separately fitted parts up there, as you can see, and wherever handrails and such have been separately applied, they are done nicely and they seem to be made of metal, so that goes for the handrails on the side of the boiler, and also of course the handrails around the cab area. Again, there are a few areas of crudeness though. I suppose the main one is the big parting line which goes across the top of the model. Yeah, that's a little bit crude, isn't it? And then one or two of the details seem a little bit large and chunky. Some areas do sell the illusion quite nicely though. I mean, the smoke box door looks alright, doesn't it? Just because of the sheer amount of moulded detail. And the finish on that isn't too bad either. I've definitely seen worse when it comes to metallic paint of that sort. And then around the cowcatcher, the pilot area, again, the level of detail is not too bad here. You've got the separately fitted uncoupling mechanism there, which is free to move. You've got a fairly nicely moulded cowcatcher on the front with the easy mate coupling, which appears to be damaged. I don't think that is supposed to be sitting quite like that. I'll have a look at that later on. And then there is an element of depth around here because just behind the running plate, you can see we've got detail back there as well. So it is very much a sort of Hornby Railroad-esque model in terms of its level of detail. Absolutely fine, of course, for what it cost, but do bear in mind this isn't a super detailed premium model magically available for a low price. It's pretty cheap because it's pretty basic. Let's have another close-up on the wheel set then, because the actual casting of the wheels is lovely. I really do like those wheels. They're a little bit reminiscent of bullied wheels, aren't they, used on the bullied Pacifics? Yeah, I'm not sure if you'd call them box pop wheels, but they certainly look similar, don't they? And then you've got the very large, thick, chunky coupling and connecting rods, of course, which is, I believe, quite prototypical. They wouldn't have been little slim rods on a loco as beastly as this. And then let's take a look at the tender, which overall I would say is manufactured to a higher standard than the loco itself. The decoration seems to be a little bit more careful. The Union Pacific lettering, for instance, on the side is all nicely done, and there's very little paint bleed on this separately applied yellow and grey area, although again it's not entirely perfect, particularly up where the water tank joins with the grey of the body, so I suppose that is something. I do like the wooden texture across the top of the tender, that looks pretty decent, and around the back you've got some separately fitted ladders as well as a light, which I'm hoping will have an LED inside, and then there's a fair bit of detail on, well, in the UK, what we would call the buffer beam. Again, you've got that uncoupling apparatus and an easy mate coupling on the back, which does actually appear to be in one piece and free to turn, which is good. The bogie detailing is okay. They look a bit detached, don't they, from the rest of the model. I guess I'll have to look at some pictures to find out whether that is accurate. but there's a fair bit of moulded detail on there, I suppose. The wheels though are made of metal, which is something I feel I should praise on a loco as basic as this. Obviously because the tender does have pickups in it, yeah, that necessitates the wheels being made of metal, but features like that show that the quality is not sort of rock bottom, it's not absolutely horrible, and overall, like I say, because of its sheer size and its proportions, I can't help but enjoy this locomotive. If it had have cost me £200 or £300, I'd probably be angry with how basic it is, but because it was sold at such a reasonable price, I feel like I can enjoy it without blowing a hole in my bank. So I'm going to take this thing apart, I'll have a look at the mechanism. Again, just like with the level of detail, I don't have massively high hopes, but as long as it's competently designed, I guess I'll be able to give it a pass, but at the moment, no idea at all. So I'll do that, I'll film the process, I'll get it down onto the track, and together we will give it its first ever test. So there she is, down onto the layout for the first time, ready for the first ever test. First though, as promised, a little bit on the mechanism. The mechanism is basically a little bit like the level of detail, probably okay for the money, not the greatest though. Pickups then, pickups are okay. First of all, you've got 4 pickups per line from the locomotive, you've got wiper pickups touching the wheels, and then just 2 pickups per line in the tender. You've got those, like I say, very primitive wipers just going to 2 axles per bogie. I suppose that is what it is, isn't it? It's better than nothing. Removing the base keeper plate reveals the less good part of the mechanism because there are no proper bearings on any of the driving wheels, and we do have square slots cut into the chassis, which is a really nasty cheap feature, and particularly because this is a very heavy loco, there's going to be a lot of weight pushing down on just those single points on each of those bearings. Yeah, it's not a great design, that, unfortunately. Body removal was fairly easy, and it does reveal the very heavy metal chassis, which is great. That's where all of that weight comes from. As you can see, there is a big chunky motor, just like the instructions said there would be, and that is indeed a 5-pole motor. I was able to count the poles through one of the little apertures in the motor there, so that's fantastic. It does have a flywheel fitted to it as well, which is wonderful, and the model does appear to be finished off with LED lighting. You can see we've got an LED there, although no smoke generator or anything like that, but the instructions suggested that some versions of this model might come with one. The tender I wasn't actually able to get apart. I had a look, I couldn't find a way to get it off, although I do believe there's an 8-pin socket inside there if you wanted to chip it. The gauging was absolutely fine, 14.4mm, some of the axles measured in at 14.5, that's absolutely fine, that is spot on as far as I'm concerned. Right, so that is the mechanism done. I have bent the drawbar on the loco to tender connection, so as you can see the tender is now sitting properly on the track, I think. I'm still not convinced by the tender and loco coupling solution. I would be surprised if the loco ran perfectly with that, because as I say, with all those wires just higgledy-piggledy, there's quite a bit of resistance in the articulation. I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see, I think. But, are you ready? Let's do the first ever test. I'm going to set the loco forwards. First question, does it work? Yes, it does, and that was actually a really lovely smooth start, wasn't it? Now the instructions were clear to say that a bit of running in was required before the loco runs at its best, so I do intend to do, you know, a full 30 minutes in each direction before I draw any firm conclusions, but straight out of the box this seems to be running fairly well. It is a little bit slow. That's 40% speed and that is 50% speed, so whether it's designed to run that slow, and it always will, or whether it will speed up as running in commences, I'm not entirely sure. But at the moment that does seem a little bit on the slow side. Is that slow because it's geared, or is it slow due to a lack of torque? It's slow due to a lack of torque. That's at 50% speed. Yeah, no power there. That's quite common in these Bachmann locos, which is a shame because that motor did look really big and beefy. Maybe it's because of the rubbish bearings. Maybe they're just requiring too much energy to turn the wheel set. I don't know. Maybe that will improve though as running in commences. Right, what's the crawl like just for the record book? Let's have a look. I'll turn it up gradually. The crawl is beautiful. Really, really good crawl. No torque, don't get me wrong. Put my finger there, the thing stops dead. But light loco with no load, the crawl is absolutely fantastic. Really, really impressed with that. Backwards, is it just as good? Yeah, it's just a single driven axle, by the way. It's this one, I believe, axle, well, 3 from the front. Yeah, look at that. It's a good crawl. really good crawl. It's just remarkably similar to the 9F actually, which again has a good quality motor and a flywheel, but no proper bearings, and that one had no power as well. Yeah, I don't know. With a loco that had such a massive tractive effort in real life, I can see this being a bit of a weakling. But let's see how it gets on around the track then. 50% speed. I might go to 60 if it's too slow, but we'll start off with 50, see how it gets on. At least it looks nice as it runs. Right, let's see. Oh, it slowed down straight away on that curve. Let's see if we get any jip from that slightly dodgy loco to tender connection. Oh, look at that, how remarkably similar that is to the 9F's performance. That's the second radius curve and it's all derailed completely. Okay, I'll go and stop it. Okay, let's go again. You can see the slowdown there, and that's a fourth radius curve right there. So, yeah, forget second radius maybe. We're having a second chance right now. Oh dear. Yeah, very much the same things happened again. Derailed. Attempt the third. I'm going to try this now on the inside, well, the middle line technically. Ooh. Yeah, still a real struggle on second radius. Somehow it managed to do it okay on that line though, so yeah, we'll wait and see if it can actually do a lap. That would be nice. Yeah, I don't have any explanation for that really. I mean, my track isn't great, that is true, but yeah, very few locos behave like that. The Berkshire doesn't behave like that, and the Daylight doesn't behave like that, so it's not just, you know, large locos don't handle second radius curves. And I do have very large steam locos on this railway from time to time, but this one does not seem to like it. Handled that curve a bit better that time though, that's not too bad. Okay, so to be fair, my track isn't very well laid, it's on the floor, it's not ideal, it does use tight curves, so your mileage may vary. Second radius on a properly laid baseboard, for instance, maybe that will work better. But on the test that I subject every one of my locos to, I can't say that I'm particularly impressed with this one, although touch wood, it seems to be okay now on the middle line, so yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll let this run in forwards and then backwards, and then I'll come back to you in an hour's time and we'll do some more tests. Not too impressed though. Even if it was handling the curves and the track properly, there's still a serious lack of torque there. I think I might have spoken too soon, folks. Let's see. Yep, it's off. I realised after I'd filmed that last segment that the tender was actually uncoupled from the loco. So the loco was only completing circuits because the loco and tender were just held together with the wires and not by that dodgy coupling. As soon as I reattached that coupling, it started derailing again. And here we go without the tender properly connected, so now it's just being held with the wires. And I'll see if it actually works this time. I'm figuring this out live, so we'll see. But yeah, as you can see now, it's done it. In other words, the loco to tender connection is just inadequate. You've got a drawbar, no screw, no nothing holding it together. There's a whole load of thick, stiff wires which hold the loco and tender together, and it's just not adequate. It doesn't do the job. There's so much stiffness there that either the loco, the tender, or sometimes both, depending on your look, will just derail on tight curves. Let's try it on the outside line without the tender coupled properly. Okay, outside line test 4, I don't know. Alright, well it slowed down horribly because of the huge lack of torque, but without the tender coupled properly, it did actually handle the curve, so there we go, that's the culprit. We now know what's to blame. So unfortunately, even before the thing has been run in, I've got to say, I think it's a load of rubbish. I have never had a loco that cannot actually finish its review because it can't get around the track without derailing. And I found that problem. I mean, come on, the first thing I said was that the loco and tender connection wasn't right. And now we're on the track and it's causing problems. I guess you could say my intuition was right. Yeah, it's not right, unfortunately. It's no good. It's far too underpowered, but that doesn't really matter because it just derails hopelessly anyway. So yeah, I'll have a look. I'll investigate the loco and tender connection. I might be able to fix it. I might not. We'll see. I'll be back shortly. Oh, that is so disappointing. So I was really, really looking forward to this one, but no matter how you look at it, almost every aspect of the performance is farcically poor. The crawl is the only thing that I would say is really good about the performance. Everything else is just a bit of a letdown, really. Now, and I figured out what it is. You know when the drawbar is connected to the tender, and then the loco goes around a corner, those wires, because they are so numerous and so stiff, they push against the drawbar, and that just puts it applies a torque to the loco or to the tender and causes them to shoot off the track. So yeah, it's just not a good solution. I've also seen derailments due to the bogies because they're not sprung at all. There's no spring at all. They just literally sit onto the track, which means if you haven't got perfectly even track, you are going to see some instability there. Now, that's partly my fault, of course, for not having even track, but it's mainly Bachmann's for assuming that everyone's got nice even track. A little bit of a spring under the bogies would just push them onto the tracks, make sure they're not going to jump off, and the job would be a good one. Then, of course, you've got the almost complete lack of torque. Let's try starting this up. Let's wind it up to 50% speed. You can see that it has improved, actually. The wheels are now turning, but I have noticed you're still getting slowdowns, even on the wider radius curves, because there's so little power there. And at 50% speed, it kind of just looks like it's struggling. It doesn't look like a 100 mile per hour passenger locomotive, does it? So yeah, I just think the mechanism and the design of everything hasn't had the care and the attention that it needed, unfortunately. It hasn't had the effort put into it. And yes, the loco is cheap, but is it cheap enough so that all of that is okay? I don't think so. I don't think there's any such thing as a loco being cheap enough to balance out the fact that it doesn't work properly. I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about pulling power. I measured a tractive effort of 0.46 newtons, which is okay, but it's much less powerful than other locos I have of this size, and it's almost half the pulling power of the Garrett, so it's not a great hauler. So I've just set up 5 Pullman coaches plus a converter car at the front. It's a little bit pathetic, I know, but seriously, I don't really want to couple it up to much more than that because, of course, we're relying on the wires to pull the whole train. But I suppose the fact that they are such thick, stiff wires means that it's not too bad. Another thing happened, by the way, while it was running in. It went round one curve and the front of the tender here sort of burst off in dramatic fashion, frightened me half to death. But it did give me the opportunity to mess around with the wires, you know, push them back into the tender a little bit to take up some of the slack. And I also tried pulling them out a little bit further to give them more slack. No, eventually the thing still derailed. And still the best way I've found to get this to run is to just unhook the tender so it's pulled along by the wires. What a ridiculous situation. Anyway, let's reverse and let's go couple. Okay, steady. So actually, it's probably a good thing that I'm using that converter wagon because it does have a Bachmann coupling on it, so they ought to be compatible. Have they coupled? Is it actually going to get that aspect right? Yes. And good Lord, it's struggling. Come on, a bit more power. Keep giving it some more. Yeah. It's not exactly a powerhouse. It's a shame about that. Right, I will just stop it there then, just for a second, because I did promise I would do a bit of a size comparison. So here we have an A4, and you can see the difference in size between the two. Bear in mind, the A4 is in a larger scale, quite a considerably larger scale. Yeah, it's just entirely dwarfed, isn't it? I mean, the tender of the Bachmann American loco, minus the cab of the A4, I would say the tender of the Union Pacific is about the same size as an A4, one of Britain's largest locos. It's crazy, isn't it, that? Crazy. And I suppose if the A4 was in HO scale too, then they would actually be even more similar. Off they go. And then on the inside line, I have the daylight. I forget now whether this is a GS1 or a GS4, but this one does work on, I think, all of my curves, actually, because it doesn't have those annoying wires connecting loco and tender. And also its bogies have springs under them as well, which just keeps them on the track. I mean, it's simple stuff, isn't it? Such a pity that the Union Pacific steamer seems to be such a poor design. Oh. But on the plus side, I mean, it's not almost coming to a stop on the second radius curves now. Oh, I think it has derailed, but oh, there we go, it's put itself back on the track. Isn't that marvellous? So you've got a choice with this loco, and it's a decision that's made for you. It either slows down to a crawl on the curve, which is very unrealistic, or one of its wheels jumps off the track, but it doesn't slow down. So yeah, it's always a nice fun bit of lucky dip with this one. So no doubt some people are going to say I got unlucky, because they always do, and I don't know, maybe they're right. However, I have identified a number of design issues with this, the tender to loco connection being the main one, I suppose. As far as I'm concerned, luck doesn't have very much to do with that. I mean, it's not unlucky that wires happen to be put in there. Somebody had to design them that way, and the fact that I've more or less proved that that's what's to blame more or less takes luck out of the equation as far as I'm concerned. But sure, the lack of torque and the slowing down on curves, that could be due to bad luck in that I got a poor motor yet again. It does seem to happen rather a lot with Bachmann locos, doesn't it? So here comes some of my ratings for the Union Pacific FEF from Bachmann. Yeah, it's a shame about this one because I thought it was going to be a really good value purchase, and of course had it run properly I think it would have become exactly that, but unfortunately it doesn't excel in any category, as you can see. So level of detail, for obvious reasons, has to be 2-star, perhaps even that is generous. Very limited decoration, some parts haven't been painted at all, no cab detail or anything like that, plenty of paint bleed on the things that had been painted. The details that were separately fitted were quite chunky and in some places unattractive. There are some nice fine handrails and such though, and the tender itself looks really quite decent, and overall the finish is rather good as well, which is why I've given it what I have. But yeah, it's not up to modern standards or anything, is it? The performance, again, I've had to give it 2-star. On the plus side, the crawl is fantastic. There's no torque there, but it does crawl slowly, which has to count for something. But there's a complete lack of torque there. You put your fingers in front, the wheels lock up, couple more than, you know, a few wagons or a few coaches, and it just bottoms out. It hasn't got the power. It slows down dreadfully on curves. Yes, second radius curves, but even third on fourth radius curves cause a huge noticeable slowdown in this. There's just a serious lack of torque, and it's nothing to do with the gauge either, because the gauging was pretty much spot on. Of course, also you've got those derailments caused by the tender, stiff wires, loads of stiff wires bridging from loco to tender. They push on the drawbar on the tighter curves, and either the loco or the tender buckles and just comes off the track. It's just a really poor design in my opinion, and while no doubt some examples of this somewhere actually work properly, I've fiddled and messed about with mine. I just cannot produce a decent improvement. So that is what it is, unfortunately. 2-star on performance. The pulling power, 28 coaches on straight and level track. That's not too bad, don't get me wrong. And when I did test that, the wheels were basically stopped. However, that is almost half of what the Garrett is, and it's less than the GT3, even less than the Fowler 4P from Hornby, despite those being much smaller locomotives. So yes, it's powerful enough, adequately so, but it's nothing impressive by any means. Mechanism, I've given this 3-star. There are one or two nice things in the mechanism. I love the 5-pole motor and the flywheel, even though it doesn't appear to have very much power. And I do like the number of pickups, plenty, that's pretty good. However, those square bearings and the lack of turned metal bearings on the axles, totally unforgivable really. And of course that loco to tender coupling design, it's just not right, it doesn't work properly. I'm having to run the loco literally pulling its tender with the wires, which is not ideal at all. Quality then, I've given 2.5-star. There are quite a few things that let the quality down. You've got that paint bleed, the plastic body, of course, plastic detailing. There's not very much metal involved besides the heavy metal chassis, which is tucked away inside, and besides a few handrails and such. Yeah, it's very plasticky. The lack of bearings loses a point for that, and also the poor design on the tender, which I know I keep mentioning, but it really is a crucial failure, unfortunately. Value for money then, this was definitely going to be 5 stars, and for £70, I mean, it's a project that may be worth undertaking. However, I can't give a loco that is not fit for purpose 5-star on value for money. That just doesn't make any sense. So I've given it 4-star. If you know what you're getting yourself into and you can find it for the same price I did, then maybe it's recommended, but it's still a bit of a headache, isn't it? And now I just look at the thing as it runs and think, is it going to derail on the next curve? Is it going to slow down and stop? Is its motor going to burn out when it does? It's just quite a stressful loco to run, unfortunately. So overall, that score of 5.65 out of 10 is justified. Let's put that into the ranking. Ooh, yes, second to bottom, just above the Pico My Train and below the Helgen Class 14. Well, unfortunately, I don't get very many locos that are not fit for purpose and cannot run around the layout, but very sadly, this was one of them. Ah well folks, you win some, you lose some, and fortunately, I mean most of the time I do win them, don't I? I've got, you know, going on 500 engines that do take this layout without any problems, so I guess just one or two that don't is to be expected. But I'm a bit disappointed because this was such a good bargain and the loco looks good, you know. If it had have run just halfway decently, I would have been really so happy with this, but as it stands, I can't see it being a loco that I'm going to run very much. Sending it back is out of the question. It's going to cost more than the loco was worth to do that. It wouldn't be worth the retailer's time and money to do that, and it certainly isn't worth mine. So I guess I'll just stick with it. I guess I've got an interesting loco for the requests now, so no doubt people will be asking this to run with egg vans and Bullman with the tender coupled properly. I don't know, I guess I've got all that to look forward to, but that is it for my review. I think that's all I've got to say on this. Your mileage, of course, may vary. If you've got an example of this, please do share with me how it runs. Is it any different? Are yours faster? Are yours more powerful? Do yours slow down on curves? And do yours derail due to the loco to tender coupling? And I guess also, do the bogies come off the track because they're not sprung properly or at all? Yeah, do let me know, do let me know. I would be interested to know whether other people's locos have these features, in inverted commas. But for now, thank you very much for watching, thank you for your time, thank you for your company, and I will see you very soon for, hopefully, a better loco in a different review. Okay, cheers folks, take care.